Cool. Welcome to the third webinar of the Civic Tech conference. This session will look at reshaping the norm as we reflect. This is the third Civic Tech conference looking at strengthening the Civic Tech ecosystem. Our speakers for today is Audrey Tang, who is Taiwanese minister, digital minister. We've got Leslie Williams, who is the CEO of the Timologong Digital Innovation Precinct. And we've got Tiani Ngoma from Geek Culture. Unfortunately, Zine Nkukwana couldn't join us today because she fell sick last night. But obviously, just to give you a few house rules, if everybody can look at the bottom of the screens, you've got the option of sending your questions there by the Q&A. Please submit those there. And if you have any other questions or comments, if you could put those in the chat. You could click on that and it will open a screen on your left tab. But since we're running behind time, Audrey, I'm giving you the floor if you could begin.
Sure. So I have, what, 10 minutes?
Yes, please, 10 minutes.
Okay, right. So hello, I'm Audrey Tang, Taiwan's digital minister in charge of social innovation. Really happy to be here virtually. And please feel free to ask me questions anytime during chat. So this is a very brief overview of how we make democracy work with Civic Tech here. Here I'm quoting Dr. Tsai Ing-wen, now in her second term. When she was inaugurated the first time 4 years ago, she said, "Before we think of democracy as showdown between two opposing values, but from now on, democracy must become a conversation between many diverse values." And indeed, in traditional thinking, there's any number of showdowns between opposing values. There's values around economic development versus environmental sustainability. There's around technological innovation versus social justice and so on. And previously, the ministers in the cabinet or the MPs were sorted into those various different knots like representatives, each representing a part of the society. And the career public service is like this a rope in between that have to survive all the tension while trying not to break the bond between the various social sectors. But after the advent of the social web and the hashtag, everything changed. Nowadays, people with the right hashtag, like hashtag #MeToo or hashtag climate strike or hashtag anti-ELAB and so on, thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people can just organize among themselves without needing a representative. And indeed, the role of government must change because we cannot keep setting up new ministries and new agencies whenever there is a trending hashtag. So my work in the past 4 years as Taiwan digital minister is try to answer a different set of questions. And this is my office, by the way, the Taiwan Social Innovation Lab. This is an open office. We tore down the walls. Everybody can come in, talk to me for 40 minutes at a time. So we ask the questions. Instead of asking who are the representatives and how do we arbitrate between them, we ask, okay, people have different positions. Are there common values after all? And given common values, are there some innovations that can deliver on those values without leaving anyone behind? And to do so, we learn from the internet governance community, the Civic Tech community, with the idea of radical transparency. And so here in my office, everybody can visit me, but the only thing I ask in return is that everybody need to agree to publish the entire transcript after 10 days of co-editing online. And this very simple rule of radical transparency very much enabled a very different set of lobbying. So everybody can see, as a digital minister, I've talked to 5,000 people over more than 1,000 meetings in more than 200,000 speeches. And every lobbyist, when they come to me, or journalists and so on, everybody must make their argument. For example, David Plouffe was arguing for Uber at the time. They must make arguments based on the global goals, based on the partnership, because they know that this conversation will be posted online to be viewed by other stakeholders. So people make only public benefit arguments instead of private benefit arguments. And so the main idea of this, what we call norm first co-creation, is that whenever there's the emerging hashtag, such as hashtag self-driving vehicles or PEVs, like these self-driving tricycles, very cute, we give them a sandbox, meaning that you can break regulations for a while without getting a fine or a penalty. But in return, you have to be radically transparent as of the open source, open hardware, and as well as the open collaboration with the society. So these self-driving tricycles, they interact with the nearby Jianguo flower market, so that people, instead of saying that what the technologies impose on the society look at those self-driving creatures and start saying, okay, maybe we can ask them to be our shopping carts when we're shopping for flowers. They can accompany us. They can enable hands-free shopping and things like that. So instead of the technology dictating what a society must adapt or behave, the social norm co-created with the technologiist enabled everybody to tinker with these open source technologies so that they become like two eyes. They can read the gesture, the emotion of people, and so on. And after a year or so of sandbox, if it's a good idea, then the society adopts it. So in a couple months in Taipei, you will now see a self-driving buses that have learned to yield to the elders first and so on, the local norms based on those ideas. And they serve after the metro stops working. So maybe around midnight time to ensure everybody's safety, but in dedicated lanes. And so everybody feel that they have integrated, co-domesticated with the society, enabling effective partnerships without leaving any sector feeling pressured into accepting ideas from the other sector. And so, because I only have 10 minutes, I only talk about one specific idea, but know that every year we ask hundreds of teams to propose such ideas to enable sustainable infrastructure and identify their work with the SDGs, that's to say the global goals. So for example, a team of people repairing water pipes from the Taiwan Water Corporation can actually just post it what they feel like their main problem. It took on average 2 months for a water pipe leak to be detected using such a kind of hearing device, and they share it with the private and social sector who co-create this chatbot. And so through this chatbot, everybody, the repair people, can just wake up and look at WhatsApp, and the chatbot will say, here are the 3 most likely leaking points around you, so they can focus their energy on solving the problem instead of very redundantly, trivially detecting the problem, which is very time consuming. And all the top 5 teams every year receive a trophy shaped like this. So it is a micro projector. When turned on, it projects the president's image, promising whatever they have prototyped in the past 3 months will become national policy in the next 12 months. So it's the presidential binding power as the main award. There's no monetary award. And for everybody in the top 20 team, we coach them to become a data collaborative, meaning that the social sector govern the data as a data coalition, and the public sector endorse and join without controlling the data governance. And this is exactly why Taiwan can have like literally tens of thousands of small measuring devices called air boxes that report the air quality in real time. But these are set up in primary schools, in balconies, just by volunteers in the social sector, and everybody keep each other honest using a distributed ledger technology. And because of this, they bargain with the environment minister, who is less legitimate than the citizen scientist, because at that time, the citizen scientists have more than 2,000 spots, and the environment minister only have 78. And so they say, we will allow you to reuse our data and inspect and calibrate our devices. But in return, we ask you to set up our devices in these gaps. And these gaps are the private sector industry parks. And it turns out that the industrial parks, although they are private property, the lamps belong to the public sector. And so we work with the municipalities to set up such air boxes in this private sector's space, so that all the 3 sectors can work together, and everybody can just download it and run it on local hardware like Arduino, Raspberry Pi, and things like that. And for this is also part of the SDG, which is a global education for sustainable development and global citizenship. And finally, this is my last slide. I would like to share a new voting method that we employed to determine the top 20 to receive the coaching every year. We use a newly invented voting system called quadratic voting, or QV, because in traditional voting, if you have more than 100 proposals, people will compete on only the top 3 or top 2, and most people will feel they have lost when only the top 1 winner is chosen, and so on. And now with more than 100 proposals every year, we ask people to join on this e-participation platform called Join GOVTW, which has more than 10 million users out of 23 million in Taiwan, so a lot of people, and everybody is given 99 tokens that they can use to vote on anything. For example, if they care about marine debris, they can vote for the solution of it using drones and computer vision to clean up the marine debris at sea. If they vote for 1 vote, that costs 1 point. But if they vote 2 votes, that will cost 4 points. 3 votes, 9 points. 4 votes, 16 points in total. So it's quadratic. Each marginal cost of each additional vote is the same as the marginal return. So with 99 points, you can only vote 9 votes, which cost 81, and you still have 18 left. And that motivates people to look at another thing, for example, the water box that does the same thing as the air pollution measurement, but for water pathways, so that it can report pollutions on arable lands. And of course, you have 18 left, you maybe want to vote 4 votes, which costs 16, and you still have 2 left, and so on. So everybody is motivated to look at least 4 sustainable goals and pick and choose between them, maybe to do a 7 and 7, and so on, to uncover the synergies. So when we announce the top 20, everybody feel that they have won, instead of that only half of the people feel that they have won. So just a simple innovation in even voting technology can very much expand the reach of social preferences and the civic tech scene, so that people in the civic tech community can naturally find allies instead of seeing themselves as competitors. And now my time is up. And so in the last minute, I'll just read you my job description, because everything I just described is to make sure that instead of like the first slide where the dogs fight each other and pull at each other, we want to make sure that the social innovation makes all the 3 sectors see that they have the shared understanding based on the global goals. And my own role within this as digital minister is just to enhance reliable data, effective partnership, and open innovation. And 4 years ago, when the global goals was first announced, and I said, this is my job description, our HR people said, Minister, nobody memorized those numbers of the global goals. So you have to say something in plain language. And so I translated that into a poem, which is my job description. I'll read it to you. That's my kind of final contribution as an opening. And it goes like this. When we see the Internet of Things, let's make it the Internet of Beings. When we see virtual reality, let's make it a shared reality. When we see machine learning, let's make it collaborative learning. When we see user experience, let's make it about human experience. And whenever we hear that the singularity is near, let us always remember the plurality is here. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Audrey, and hello, everybody. Good afternoon. I really must apologize. This is our 3rd webinar and a great start from, I caught, I think, most of Audrey's presentation. Unfortunately, I started off with technical problems myself. But thank you for jumping right in, Audrey. Really appreciate the presentation, and I've actually taken some notes on your poem. I think if we didn't before, we have cause now to reflect on these issues in these different times. So thank you so much. Attendees, welcome all of you, and apologies again for the late start. What I'd like to do is not waste a lot of time now, but just segue on to Leslie Williams, who's going to be making the 2nd input. I'll post short bios on each of the speakers and panelists into the chat box rather than spend time reading them. But Audrey is not new to many of us. We heard you at the last conference, and you're back definitely by popular demand. So thank you for making the time in spite of big parliamentary demands on you today. Leslie is also not a new face to us. Many of us know her beautiful face from Simolochong and from our last conference. Leslie, I'll hand over to you while I post up some bios, and then we'll hear from our discussants next. I'll introduce them then. Leslie? There you are.
Geci, are we good?
We are good.
Hi. I think that was fantastic, Audrey. I could listen to you for another hour, so you'll have to come back to visit us. So what I have is more a set of thoughts that I would like to share with you. And, you know, it's not, you know, anything like really conclusive, but I do think it is a framework where we can start thinking about how do we strengthen the civic tech ecosystem. And let me also just watch the pop. So I want to speak about this whole idea about like who owns change. And it's become quite an important note for me, or I've been reflecting on it a lot because my background is in social entrepreneurship. And what I've found is, as I've been like weaving my way through the different parts for me of the civic tech ecosystem, whatever that means, there has been, there's a sense of like, I own this, or a sense of like purity around various definitions that I don't want to be stuck on. But we do know that, especially during apartheid era, the NGOs, the non-government organizations were the good guys. There was that kind of like legacy. There's the good guys, and then there's the capitalists, and then there's government. And then this new form of business came about, like social entrepreneurs. And we started thinking, okay, how do we start using profit? And how do we, or at least surplus, to make sure that our social change initiatives are being sustainable. But then the question started dawning on me as I started spending more time in the entrepreneurship spaces and also moving to digital entrepreneurship, that there's a lot of thinking in terms of how we understand, and I'll speak more about design thinking or innovation processes afterwards. But I started seeing that a lot of our entrepreneurs are creating real problems or solving real problems in society, and they do not want the label of social entrepreneur. But when you dig into their business, they are grappling with wicked problems, and they're coming up with incredible solutions. And then I started asking, like, okay, so why is there the sense of not wanting to be labeled social entrepreneur? This whole thing about like, we real business people. So I stopped using the language social entrepreneur around them unless I saw like real funding or investment opportunities for them. And then, primarily, if you look at quite advanced societies, there's a lot of work in the social change sphere, especially if you look at a country like Denmark, for example, where government steps up and does the work of change. But now in this world of everyone speaking about Industry 4.0, it's all being blurred, which I think is fantastic. And I'll come back to that in a second. So in my background and training around social entrepreneurship, I came across, various forms of social engagement. The one is, sure, you may see a few hungry people and decide to feed them because they need to eat now. But that doesn't change their reality. It's kind of like you're solving an immediate problem, but tomorrow they'll need a plate of soup again. So for me, like, that is the social service provider. That can often go and seek funding, and you'll always have to seek funding. The same thing going to government and basically taking some of the role of government. For me, the activist is where you really start chasing or changing the status quo. That this is the problem and we want a long-term solution or engaged solution. So if I think of Treatment Action Campaign as an example, about 15 years ago, they really rose up around government, and we saw protests across the country and especially Cape Town in terms of distributing ARVs for people with HIV and AIDS. So TRC themselves, Treatment Action Campaign, they weren't the solution themselves, but they instigated others to change policy from a government perspective as well as from a pharmaceutical perspective, where the way we deal with the situation is permanently changed. So that is fantastic. We do want to get to the point where we change the status quo, and that's what it is for me. The social entrepreneur's role was blending both. We want to change things permanently and do it in a sustainable way. My one concern is that I am seeing a rise of a sense of competition among social entrepreneurs, competition around, and sometimes even clear out fights around who owns the IP, around who was first to market in the solution, around who should get the recognition. And for me, my question is, like, what was the initial intent when we started this work? Do we want to change the status quo? Because if it is about true social change, then we do need copycats. The more copycats on a solution, for me, the better, because that is when we start shifting processes. If you look at, sustainable development goals and, that Audrey just spoke about, we need to galvanize people into movements to copy working solutions to take forward. If I reflect on some, the slide is a bit messy. Some of the qualities we're seeing in innovation processes, and, we'll see the language in design thinking. there's a lot of recommendations that we, there's deep listening. We need to observe the end user, the end beneficiary of our work. We need to have empathy for them. It requires a sense of authenticity. And we need to suspend judgment about how we work with people, or what people's social behaviors are. We need to suspend judgment so we can also onboard them. And I'm seeing this being adopted in the entrepreneurship world in quite a beautiful way. And that is how, for me, social change and innovation is coming about. I do have a concern, as I spend more time in management consulting firms, as well as sometimes like corporate tech companies, that they're using the same language, and yeah, they're the same practice. But for me, it does seem like there's a sense of manipulation for revenue gain only, and not true allegiance with the end user. And I think, there is going to come a time where we're going to start weaving out. I think, be it the end customer or the community, can sense manipulation. I think people don't mind paying when there's clear value exchange. Not everybody can pay, but I do think we need to have an ethical boundary that we need to think about, like when we work with communities. And again, like, what is the true intent of what we want to create? So I think when we start with the true intention, when we speak to different stakeholders, we need to first understand, like, what is that clarity of our why before we even start thinking of onboarding people into whatever mission it is that we want to achieve. So we need to start convening people in a very sort of intentional way. We need to map, like, who are our allies when we want to create change. There needs to be a super clear call to action, because, sometimes, to be honest, like, people are exhausted. They have fatigue around change promises. The other thing is, that people are fickle. So they'll hop on to the next thing where they think they can be benefits. So we do need to be clear about what our why is. If I think of innovation spaces like Simologong, and I'm really sad you're not here because I wanted to show you some cool stuff, but the universe has collided for us to be innovative and go online. I'm starting to see different spaces specialize. And I think that is fantastic when you start thinking about a civic tech mindset and innovation spaces. We do need to get good at specializing and shifting the entire value chain of the work we're doing. About 3 weeks ago, I went to the launch, or 2 weeks ago, of ocean hubs in Cape Town. And I think it's fantastic that an ocean hub belongs in Cape Town. We're looking at ocean life, we're looking at marine life, we're looking at overfishing. Those topics are central to that community. So while up in Johannesburg, we are beneficiaries of their work, we know that that node is where the expertise need to be formed. And it would be easy to group people and get things done. So my hope is that we do actually get to the point where we start clustering our skills and our expertise, so there can be a bit more strategy around how we bring change about. How am I doing on time? So when you start thinking, again, like I said, that value change of what you want to solve, you need to understand, like, who are the actors that you need to bring around the table, and actually intentionally map out the ecosystem. So I just grabbed this from one of the Simologong slides, because we work as an ecosystem, a digital innovation ecosystem. So entrepreneurship's at the heart of everything we do, and we support entrepreneurs. But we have corporates, we're born out of university, so we have access to research. We work with government, and then there's always financiers. Now, every single one of these actors will have their own agenda, and that is okay. I think for me, it's about weaving out, like, what are those common, what's the common purpose within it? Often people say you need a common enemy or a common purpose to galvanize the community and get things done. And, sometimes it's not always obvious to people what they need. So again, we need to take on that sales role around selling the value, and how, if we come together, what the ultimate value is for society is. So these are questions that I generally come up with every time I look at, be it food ecosystems, the future of food, and to sorry, I'm so thinking about coronavirus all the time at the moment. If I think about mobility, we need to start mapping the ecosystems around all these topics and then ask, okay, like who are the actors, and give people specific roles, but also understand what is your role. You know, it doesn't start and end with being a convener, but we do need to keep people together. So I just came up with a few ways to, you know, build a community around it. Thing is, you need to lobby and excite people, you know, tell great stories, use examples. We need to almost evangelize, become evangelists, and find people who will be champions for the cause. I think we've all seen that video by now of the importance of the second follower. You know, those are great champions. We want that. And then there always needs to be community activations or co-creation events. And for me, when I think about, again, be it design thinking or innovation processes, this has been skills that's been with the NGO society, communities, and social entrepreneurs for the past 20 years and beyond. We know how to do it. I think it's using the assets that we have and aligning it with the sort of like new innovation language, and I think stand up proudly. And then, like I said earlier, people need roles when building an ecosystem. I just want to quickly touch on, and I'm not going to go into too much detail, but we do find ourselves really at a point where we do need to embrace technology. And to some extent, I've been preaching to myself, because 5 years ago I said, look, everyone's starting tech hubs. I'm going to stick to artistic hubs, media hubs, social entrepreneurship hubs. But these worlds are all intertwining. 4R is allowing us to do that. I think it's fantastic. I think there's parts in our country where we're stuck in the second industrial revolution, where we're still battling with issues of energy and road infrastructure, never mind going to manufacture and so much more. I want to touch on digital twins for a second. You'll have to Google to look it up deeper. We don't have enough time now. But it's basically a form of technology that allows you to simulate an experience before building out the solution in a real way. So you have countries and cities literally building models and even like 3D printing how the future city will look like. So for me, I think when you start speaking about community engagement, and government always says we need to have citizen engagement, like vote on this, do we want to go ahead? We're at that point now where it can go beyond words, but people can imagine and in fact even immerse themselves in the experience before voting for something that they may or may not want. And I think that is fantastic. We have in the past 5 years seen the rise of the platform economy and the sharing economy. And again, that for me liberates democracy and engagement for people. And then again, there is this balance. I put here big data, big data is fantastic, but we mustn't also lose the quality of micro data. And for me, you get your micro data if you think of the old school, the corner shop family business that knew the neighbor intimately, or knew the person down the road, you fully understood their needs. There was a relationship, there was a connection. So take the big data, but let's not lose the relationship in the value of micro connections. And I think for now, let's not let a good crisis go to waste. We have a global crisis. There's more openness to listening to each other and hearing each other and collaborate. And I think, this is a humanitarian issue. So for me, the opportunity for the civic tech community can be at the forefront. So that is me.
Thank you, Leslie. I think what a really great call. It stood out for me, your comment, your question actually, what is our why? And I think what a great question. And that's come through in the previous webinars as well. Everybody talking about what's unique about what we do in this space is about a value system. And perhaps what this crisis is calling all of us out on is what value system underpins a lot of what we've been doing globally. And I think that's a great question. You also talk about needing to tell our stories. So maybe I'll use that as an opportunity for a quick advert for the Civic Tech Network, which is starting to showcase case studies of good work that's happening around. And so that'll be up on the website soon. But also one of the things we intended to do this week at Tshimologong was have an exhibition, obviously, about some of the great projects around us. What we are still doing, and you'll see again via our website, is those that were going to be digital exhibitions. We're starting to post those up. So if you go to the conference webpage and you go down to digital exhibitions, you'll see that Tsepo is doing a great job of starting to post up some of those projects that are doing really interesting work. And you're right, it really excites us. I mean, Audrey, when you're showing us, I mean, there's a difference between seeing things and hearing about things. So seeing things and hearing those stories is so important for creating the excitement, but also making more real to people, I think, the possibilities around this space. But I am not the discussant, I must remind myself. Let me welcome, and for those of you who have noticed, attendees, I've posted the bios up in the chat space, and there's some good chatting going on there. People have also begun posting some Q&As, and some panelists have already began responding in text, but we'll come back to all of that. I'd like to bring on board Tiani. So Tiani Nkonyama, who I don't get to see quite enough, is the COO of Geek Culture, based in Pretoria, right? Is that correct, Tiani? Are you in Tswane?
Yes, we're in Centurion, but we work all over the country.
Okay, excellent. So I'm going to hand over to you just to hear some of your reactions and thoughts on the ecosystem issues and broader innovation issues that Audrey and Leslie have begun to introduce. So over. Tiani, are you there? Tiani, maybe try turning off the camera and see if that works any better. We can't hear you. I can see you, but I can't hear you.
Hello, everyone.
No, still can't hear you.
Okay. How's now?
Okay, that's better. Thank you. Hello.
Hello. Oh, shucks.
Hello, Tiani, can you hear us? Oops, okay. I think we are struggling. Okay, there, Tiani?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, that's better. Thank you.
Oh, yes. So I'll just jump into it. My name is Tiani Nkonyama. I am in charge of operations at Geek Culture. So our angle is more from the youth in terms of civic participation with the youth. And we have been working hard to make sure that government comes into the play, and then also connecting the youth closer to government. And one of the key things we've done was to do a first cabinet approved hackathon, which was led by the Department of Public Service and Administration, of which was done in around 6 provinces, and then had a national agenda as well, to try and engage the youth in terms of imagining systems, in terms of engaging local innovators to be able to build civic tech based innovation. And you might know of one of the critical projects that South Africa has in response to the Open Government Partnership, in terms of how do we share information, how do we build the capability around information sharing society as such. So the Open Data South Africa project is one of those projects that seeks to address the drive in terms of enabling access to data, and then also to be able to set guidelines in terms of how does the country release data. If it's a local government, if it's provincial, national, how do we get this data to be released and be used by innovators in building civic tech-based innovation? And we are encouraged, of course, by the level of openness, and also that there have been some great drive from the public sector. For an example, ESCOM would and then release APIs for developers to be able to build solutions that seeks to bring some information around the load shedding crisis, if you go to IEC, it is a little bit difficult, but in most cases you will then get data from the IEC to be able to build civic tech solutions that seeks to address issues. But I just want to highlight that the key fundamental issue in terms of adoption of civic tech in the country needs to be able to have the first important element, the people. You need to take the people with you. You need to be able to build the culture. You need to make sure that we localize whatever we need to do in terms of civic tech innovation, and there has to be a local champion who will then be able to lead the people. So I'm talking mostly marginalized communities as well. How do we get everyone behind? And obviously we need a process, and then we need the tools. So the three fundamental things: the people, the process, and the tools. The people being the most important one, because if we do not have that culture, we might build systems, we might build solutions, and then the adoption will become problematic. Yeah. Okay.
Tiani?
Oh yes, I was just stopping there for now.
Okay, no, great. Thank you so much. I think people, process, tools, it's already beginning to pick up on some of the points I think both Audrey and Leslie made, but it's very useful to hear about this, obviously, from your particular initiative. So thank you very much, and I'm sure there'll be some questions for you. So colleagues, I've posted into the chat that our second discussant won't be joining us, but everybody wants to be hearing people coughing, even if it's over the virtual space. So she's safely in her bed, and hopefully will feel better soon. We'll use the last 15 minutes really just taking engagement from each of you, and I'll first direct the panelists' attention to the Q&A boxes. Attendees, please feel free to keep your questions and comments coming. I'll also just mention to you that we'll ask everybody before you leave, when we come towards the closing, to please leave us a takeaway thought or insight in the webinar chat box, and we're going to be putting those together at the end of this. So if you have comments or thoughts, reflections, not necessarily questions, please do post them in the chat and we'll pick those up. Audrey, maybe we come back to you because you've responded to a couple via text already and there's still some open questions. Do you want to perhaps comment on some of what you've been responding to?
Yes, certainly. To all three questions addressed to me, I'll just read them out quite quickly, I guess. And two of them are from Elisa, and one is about whether a ministry, a kind of digital transformation ministry helps. And I said that my office is not a ministry, rather half of our office is delegates from each ministries participating in social innovation. So that's 12 ministries, each sending one delegate, and 12 civic technologies. And so it's equal parts public sector and the social sector, and the horizontal organization of them not afraid of working out loud, gradually fused into a shared value and shared language. And that's working between silos is key to digital transformation. And the other question is about making commitments to the good ideas around presidential hackathon. And yes, that's why I refer to guaranteed adoption. And the guaranteed adoption, I think, is very powerful because it basically says instead of throwing money at it, we really want to make it work. And the call to action this way is much more effective because you see the president as your co-creator, not as a president. And here is kind of my voice, and this is just 1 minute. And so I'll just play that as kind of last of my answer, and I'll hand the question back to Leslie.
Hey, are you there? Are you overwhelmed by the immediate problem? Whether it's for your ideals or your duty, you have stuck it out to the end. Come from all to face a presidential hackathon through digital technologies and innovation. Let's put our heads together to develop a game plan to change the status quo. Through the government's open data, let's do a checkup for Taiwan. Your solution will change our society. You could be the hacker that solves the problem. Hey, are you there? Team of hackers.
In our 20.
You had some thoughts? You're muted, so.
I just went to another presentation as part of my response. So I think we are in this like crazy uncertain times now where where the world is on pause to some extent. But up until a week ago, our government was really driving, and even from the president's office, 4R, like the country becoming 4R equipped. And I've been engaging with provincial government around what the role of provinces in catalyzing the province to become a smart province and becoming, digitally modelized. And, I think there's a few things that come into play. The first is the kinds of conversations we're having is about how government becomes a citizen-centric province. And I think, that was a mind-shattering conversation, an honest conversation that they even had as a team. Like, what do they need to park or amend internally to create space to become citizen-centric? For me, their role is also around enabling the right kind of infrastructure, data, etc., investing in R&D and appropriate skills. I'm just, going into one slide that I want to speak to. I think one of our barriers from an innovation space is the fact that labor policies is not friendly right now. Barriers of entry on their vendor list. So even when citizens come up with interesting innovation, they are looking at mechanisms where, they know that the policies that they created even in the 80s are no longer relevant to create an agile state. But if you look at where the country's been coming up dealing with corruption, we do need to find that balance of creating gateways or at least like open, but holding that balance of making sure that governance is upheld. I do think, in terms of open data, I think there's definitely a willingness from government. It's about finding those mechanisms in a fluid way where their internal systems are even speaking to each other and clean. They're also balancing it out with the risk that they're perceiving. And in fact, it's real risk in terms of management of information and people's personal information. So the POPI Act is going to be enforced. So we do need to make data open, but also manage the fact that it's people-sensitive data. So I think like those are some of the things. I think like ethics is always there. Just because we can, should we? Should we use it? So something that I've been pondering about a lot is, how in Sweden, instilling microchips into people has become trendy. I think like over 3,000 people in Sweden have microchips. Now, on the one hand, it becomes easy for you to move around all your data, so you can open your house, you can transact, etc. But should we do it? Do we want to become a society that has that extent of even tracking? But then you look at someone with disabilities who may often lose their keys or find it difficulty to get their bank card out, where a microchip is super convenient that allows them accessibility. So I think we also need to help or support government and other relevant stakeholders in terms of like that ethical framework that we want in this equation.
Yeah. No, I think that's so important. And these are some of the issues I think globally that people are having to focus now. Let's see, there are a couple of questions for you in the Q&A box. I wonder if you want to have a look at, I think the next 3 are for you. Maybe you start having a look at those. Tiani, maybe if I could come to you with the one at the bottom there, which is asking, what do you think are some of the blockages in our ecosystem? So when we're talking about wanting to collaborate more, and do maybe some of the things that Audrey is talking to us about, what in your experiences have been some of the obstacles actually to doing that?
Okay, so one of the common views we've always seen is that some of this work that we try to bring forward, if some innovator has an idea that seeks to address problems, you're bringing in extra work, you are challenging policies, you are also trying to bring something that is not within the current mandate, the current budget as such. So that's why what we have started to do as well is to try and at least get the community to be able to understand, firstly, how does government work? So always do government 101 session. Understand how government work, understand the different levels of government, understand the different entities and responsibilities as such. So they are mostly misaligned objectives and visions as such. And we need to be able to close that gap, obviously. So one of the things we've been doing as well is to work with the Center for Public Service and Innovation to outline what could be the pipeline in terms of bringing all these innovators and then bringing them closer to the public sector as well. So we need to have a strong engine that drives that pipeline in terms of connecting the makers to the government as such.
And then Tiani, while we've got you, and then we'll come back to you, Leslie, on some of your questions if you want to comment on them. Tiani, somebody's asking, do you think more hackathons like Taiwan's is a useful solution for South Africa? We had, what are your thoughts on that? And maybe we'll also come back to Audrey, because I think there may be a difference from what we were talking about, just having random hackathons and a more systemic one, maybe like in Taiwan. But what's your feeling about the hackathon sort of approach as we've had it in South Africa, Tiani?
Well, we host hackathons for different reasons. So one of the critical thing is how do we use these hackathons for skills development and shape the thinking of local innovators as a start, because it becomes that platform with a pool of skills, and then you are building up the skills and also be able to educate the nation, and we'll bring in different key players to be able to serve as mentors and guide the young innovators, so that when they go home, they are now able to reshape their thinking and then go back towards building solutions that matches the needs and respond to actions as such. And then you've got hackathons that are centered, and then they will say that they want to bring out solutions for the public sector or to address a certain need as such. So adoption at the end of the hackathon obviously become a little bit problematic, and it goes back to my first point in terms of what are the blockages in terms of bringing everyone together. You're now coming with a solution from a hackathon, and this solution is not currently speaking towards what a municipality, what a government department might be looking at right now. So misaligned I'm thinking and visions at particular times. But then we have had solutions that are still trying to break into the cycle. And then if someone is coming up with a public sector based solution, our best advice, and also trying to align them to look at consumer faced solution. How do you then get to build this solution without the need of governmental dependency as such? So there have been some of the solutions that are currently being incubated right now from our hackathons at the 22 Ounce Loan Global Entrepreneurship Incubator. I've managed to go through that route, that at least try to get yourself somewhere without the governmental dependency. And so some of these solutions, some of them are still being developed post hackathons as well. But one thing we appreciate most about the hackathons is that if you have got a hackathon and there's a team that comes up with a solution, it becomes an incremental development process where they now get to attend other hackathons to continue working on those solutions as well. And we also appreciate the fact that startups result from these hackathons as well. One of the startups that we have that just got registered is from a hackathon about last week. So they keep on working on their public sector based agricultural solution. They do not have all the kind of support, but they keep on building. Look at where do you build, and let everyone join in along the way.
Nice. And actually, you begin to speak to a point somebody just made in the question, I guess, around whether we are able to encourage innovations in other communities outside of our big, maybe relatively well-resourced and connected urban communities. So thank you for that point. Leslie, I'm going to circle back to you just in our last minute or so. Perhaps just a broad comment. You might want to maybe respond via text to some of the 3 questions to you. And then in the last seconds, I'll say Civic Tech, what you see going forward, and then we'll just close out. Attendees, please remember to leave us your insights before you leave, but let's go into our closing yard. Leslie?
So my intention for Timolokong and the city hubs, but we also make sure that we go hyper-local in the communities and support innovation that's happening there. And I think there are spaces, and I'm very happy to have this conversation further about how we can enable that, and also look at what assets are there already. I am excited that the more I speak to different stakeholders, the more that we are starting to design inclusion, from financial inclusion, disabilities inclusion, gender inclusion, into models. So the fact that people are struggling financially and we want to become a smart city sometimes feels like there's contradiction. But when we start thinking about some new industries that are emerging because we are focusing on sometimes on the SDGs or the creative economy, there's a lot of opportunities that from a township level, we need to start onboarding people very quickly before they get left behind. Because that's also another form of reinforcing exclusion. I think if we don't bring people on now, if you think, oh, because they have finances, they need to first be fed, then we're going to widen the gap. So we need to be intentional and very aware of that. And I'm very happy to have a conversation about business models of innovation spaces. So Keke, you can share my email there. And then also just to kind of respond to the last one around competition. Even with corporates, like every tech company is trying to have our entrepreneurs and our learners use their software. So we're very clear, like we are tech agnostic. We will create opportunity where people can see your solution. Same with entrepreneurs, space for co-opetition. We look at like, what are those connecting points where we can solve things together and people collaborate around that. And then you can compete elsewhere, but we do need to raise, be it industries or raise the status or the issues. I mean, food security for one, the value chain of food security. You can compete around whose sugar tastes better elsewhere, but over here we need all the ingredients to come up with viable solutions.
Thank you so much. So we're selling or making cake here, not selling retail products. I like it. Audrey, final thoughts from you and what you see on the horizon?
Yeah, certainly. Point around hyper-local and community empowerment, and on their terms, not on like global goal terms, not on abstract terms. I just want to share, this is my office in its usual Tuesday, what we call social innovation tours. As I mentioned, every Wednesday, people can come to Taipei, which is Taiwan's capital, to meet me. But actually every other Tuesday or so, I go to the most rural, to the remote islands, to the indigenous nations to meet people. And it's only me who travels. And so everywhere I meet people where they're already having their town halls and bring with me, because everywhere in Taiwan there is broadband. Even on the top of Taiwan, 4,000 meters, there's 10 megabits per second. It's a human right. If you don't, it's my fault. So because of that, anywhere in Taiwan, we can connect back to the Taipei city, to the aforementioned 12 ministries who look at this large projector, sharing the food. We make sure that they have similar food in all the satellite offices, and that they respond to the agenda that is set by the here and now. And because we have a national language act that says in any of the 12 indigenous languages, they can just speak their mind in their own language, and there's guaranteed to be an interpreter that carries their thoughts into this connected space. And so instead of having to work through the bureaucracies, we make sure the national government, the local government, everybody is listening to the full story of what the local people have in mind. So instead of being forced into the abstraction or traveling all the way to Taipei, only have 15 minutes to talk, we ensure that everything is transcribed. And what I'm trying to say is that the future is already here. I firmly believe, not the least due to the corona and not the beer situation, we make sure that everybody already is equipped to this kind of distance learning circles. And so the connected spaces will gradually fuse with the local places, especially around the time of the corona epidemic. And so this is becoming the norm. This is not a niche. And the various artificial intelligence, or as I prefer to call it, assistive intelligence, to automate the transcription, the transcribing, the translation, and all the different transcultural settings are being automated day by day so that people can focus on themselves. And so every time we run such a consultation, we end up with quite a few statements that we can visualize using this kind of principal component analysis, so that people can then afterwards surface the most interesting ideas by keep pressing agree or disagree on all the points that's raised. So the point here is that Civic Tech is not only about empowering people during a conversation, rather it's about carrying the consensus from one conversation to as the agenda to the next conversation. And after a couple of weeks of pressing agree or disagree on each other's statements without a reply button, because we don't want trolls, with no reply button, there's no trolls. Every time we have this kind of map that shows the 5 divisive ideologies that we just tabled, we don't even spend any calorie on these things. You can read them on newspapers, but we focus on the consensus statements of that local community. For example, they may think that the arts are important, not only science, technology, engineering, and math, but STEAM, adding arts to it because it's as creative as the STEM curricula. And this is a simple idea. It doesn't cost anything. And this is not partisan. This is not ideological. And if we keep surfacing such rough consensus, we can ensure that people see themselves as a polity instead of, as in many other liberal democracies, something that they must topple every 2 or 4 years. So to me, I think this listening at scale is one of the horizons of the Civic Tech movement.
Wow, amazing. So I think big takeaway words, the future is already here. We are being warned by, I think, by Leslie and some of what we're also hearing from Tiani, that maybe although the collaborative platforms exist and we're hearing clearly, given the access, which we hope will soon be a human right here as well, a lot is possible. The reality is right now, however, the access issues perhaps get a bit in the way of that. We're hearing about some institutional issues maybe that also get in the way of enabling and inviting this sort of collaborative possibility and potential that we hold. I think leaving it there, we are just about 7 minutes over, which in our context, Audrey, is not a train smash. I don't know how things work in Taiwan. But I'd just like to thank you for your time. Leslie, thank you for your time as well. Really appreciate it. We look forward to you hosting us, hopefully in person in the future, if things at least go back to a little bit more normal than we are now. And then Tiani, thank you so much. Sorry we couldn't see you, but we heard you loud and clear. Thank you for your input. Attendees, thank you all for being with us. Please do leave your thoughts in the chat box. The recording will be shared probably by the end of today or tomorrow on our YouTube channel. Please feel free to share that. Let's keep talking and let's keep working. Let's keep hacking. Let's keep living our values. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Have a good local time.
Thank you.